Atlanta had always been the kind of city where secrets refused to stay buried. But in 2025, when whispers began swirling about Rasheeda and Kirk Frost, the tone shifted from gossip to something far more sinister. This time it wasn't about cheating, scandals, surprise pregnancies, or leaked DMs. This time the streets buzzed about files, contracts, and hidden paperwork powerful enough to rip apart everything fans thought they knew about their marriage and empire. For years, people hailed Rasheeda as the queen of resilience, the woman who endured public humiliation season after season, yet kept smiling behind her boutique counters, posting her looks and carrying herself like a self-made mogul. But then came the terrifying question, what if none of it really belonged to her? What if the Empire fans believed she built with her bare hands had always been owned and controlled by Kirk, a man who had mastered betrayal not just through infidelity, but through the cold, calculated fine print of legal documents? The first ripples didn't come from the show or reunion arguments. They came from the very businesses tied to their names. Employees whispered about deals that never made sense. Associates claimed they had signed contracts listing Kirk Frost as the sole point of contact, even when the venture carried Rasheeda's face and name. Anonymous posts flooded Twitter and TikTok, alleging that when Frost Bistro opened its doors, Kirk had deliberately filed papers that gave him majority ownership, all while selling the public the fairy tale of a husband and wife partnership. Similar stories surfaced about Pressed Boutique, with claims that paperwork described Rasheeda as a brand consultant instead of a true co-owner. If true, these receipts meant the woman celebrated as a business powerhouse had been maneuvered into the role of figurehead while her husband quietly locked down the power behind her back. The blogs pounced immediately. Headlines screamed, "Does Kirk Frost own Rasheeda's empire?" Instagram gossip pages recycled clips of Rasheeda calling pressed her baby during old interviews, splicing them beside alleged filings stamped with Kirk's name in bold. TikTok detectives rewatched years of love and hip-hop footage, pulling confessionals where Rasheeda accused Kirk of making money moves without telling her. Back then, fans thought it was scripted drama. Now, every smirk on his face, every time he brushed off her questions, felt like confirmation that he had always been the one holding the power. Behind the curtain, the rumors got darker. Word spread that Kirk had been hoarding every contract, every deal, on a private flash drive described as his ultimate weapon. It wasn't just a piece of plastic, it was leverage. The idea that Rasheeda might have stayed, not out of loyalty, but because she was legally trapped by documents she couldn't undo, sent shockwaves through her fan base. Overnight, she was no longer painted as the wife who forgave too much. She was cast as a prisoner inside her own empire, bound by signatures, sealed deals, and a cage disguised as marriage. As people connected the dots, old memories resurfaced. Fans recalled when Rasheeda started posting alone more often, her captions cryptic, her style rebranded toward independence. Back then, everyone thought she was hinting at infidelity. Now those posts looked like warning shots, clues that she wasn't planning to escape a broken heart, but preparing to fight for her businesses, her catalog, and her very name. The internet turned the whispers into wildfire. YouTubers filmed breakdowns dissecting the Frost empire. Podcasts reframed it as a cultural conversation, asking how many women in entertainment were presented as the brand, while men quietly owned the power behind them. Suddenly, Rasheeda wasn't just a reality star. She was a case study of survival in a system designed to strip women of ownership. Yet whispers also suggested she wasn't helpless. Behind the scenes, insiders claimed Rasheeda had quietly assembled lawyers and advisors, preparing a counterattack. Fans noticed paparazzi shots of her outside courthouses, her silence in interviews, her careful avoidance of questions about her husband. The chessboard was visible now. Either Kirk would weaponize the files first, or Rasheeda would flip them back on him and drag the truth into the light. Her supporters prayed it was the latter, clinging to the hope that when she finally moved, it would be with undeniable proof. Meanwhile, Kirk's silence was deafening. A man who once relished clapping back on social media and defending himself on reunion couches now stayed quiet, fueling suspicions that he was either guilty or plotting. Some feared he might release the files himself to control the story. The image of him sitting alone with that flash drive, deciding whether to burn it or unleash it, kept the streets buzzing. Fans begged Rasheeda not to wait too long, warning her that if Kirk struck first, the empire could be shattered before she even had her footing. Even the cast couldn't resist tossing shade. One castmate quipped during an interview, "Sometimes, loyalty is just a contract you ain't read right." Another tweeted, "Y'all think you know the Frosts, but trust me, the truth ain't what it looks like." Reunion clips resurfaced where Rasheeda confronted Kirk about money while the cast avoided eye contact. What once looked like awkward silence was now dissected as complicity, proof they all knew the truth but stayed quiet to protect the storyline. The files were no longer just rumor, they were an open secret hidden in plain sight. The breaking point came when a gossip page leaked a blurred screenshot of an alleged contract. The header listed Frost Enterprises, not Pressed LLC, as the owner, though the bottom carried what looked like Rasheeda's signature. Whether real or doctored, it didn't matter. The internet believed it. Memes and think pieces spread like wildfire. The phrase Kirk's secret files trended, sounding less like gossip and more like a documentary title. Overnight, their marriage shifted from scandal to saga. This wasn't about cheating anymore. It was about empire, legacy, and who actually held the keys. Her fans split. Some accused Rasheeda of negligence, saying no true mogul could miss details in her own businesses. Others defended her as a victim manipulated by the man she trusted most. The cruelty online was relentless. Memes mocked her as an employee in her own boutique, while comments left under her photos dripped with both pity and ridicule. But through the mockery, one thing became clear. This scandal cut deeper than any affair. This wasn't about love. This was about ownership, dignity, and legacy. And through it all, Rasheeda stayed silent. She kept posting her boutique promos, her outfits, her motivational captions. But silence no longer looked like weakness. It looked like strategy. Fans began treating her every move like a signal. She wasn't dodging, she was plotting. And the anticipation only grew, with everyone waiting for the day she finally played her hand. The frenzy grew wilder as summer crept in, and the Frost Empire was no longer whispered about in corners. It was being dissected in headlines, podcasts, and endless live streams. Bloggers claimed they had seen sealed filings at the Fulton County Courthouse. Screenshots of blurry case numbers floated across timelines, each one treated like breaking news. Whether they were authentic or not didn't matter anymore. The rumor itself carried weight. Hashtags like "release the files" and Rasheeda's Kirk dominated social media, turning their private marriage into a global spectacle. Even people who had never watched a single episode of Love and Hip Hop were suddenly invested, refreshing blogs at night, desperate to know whether this was the end of an empire or the beginning of its rebirth. The streets no longer cared about infidelity or reunion drama. This had turned into a courtroom war, one where ownership, legacy, and survival were on the line. Inside their household, insiders painted a bleak picture. Whispers claimed Rasheeda had already packed up and moved out, taking her children with her, while Kirk sat alone in their house surrounded by stacks of documents. The infamous flash drive had transformed into something almost mythical, gossiped about in barbershops, beauty salons, and family cookouts, as if it held the keys to every truth fans were dying to know. Some swore it was locked in a safe behind his office desk. Others joked he carried it everywhere, like a crown jewel swinging from his keychain. Whether real or exaggerated, the symbolism couldn't be ignored. Kirk Frost had turned himself into the warden of his wife's empire, clutching paperwork like prison keys. The visual of him guarding files that could destroy her added a chilling edge to the entire saga. But Rasheeda was no longer the quiet wife swallowing betrayal for the sake of appearances. Her every move now screamed strategy. She arrived at events, flanked by lawyers instead of her husband, her wardrobe sharper, bolder, more deliberate than ever before. One day she wore a white power suit drenched in gold accessories, another day a sleek black dress stitched with the words, "Never owned, always mine" along the side. Her captions turned into rallying cries. "Legacy is priceless," she wrote, under one photo. Paper can't erase purpose. Fans treated her words like scripture, reposting them across platforms as if they were the opening lines of her Declaration of Independence. To them, this wasn't just fashion or branding. It was warfare dressed in silk and stitched in defiance. Meanwhile, the rest of the cast tossed fuel onto the fire. Carly Red hinted she had once been forced to sign NDAs related to the Frosts' businesses, teasing that the truth was uglier than y'all think. Sierra laughed on Instagram Live. When asked if Rasheeda was finally leaving, replying, "Baby, the contracts don't lie and they're gonna talk real soon." Even production insiders allegedly leaked whispers that VH1 had long known about questionable paperwork but avoided, showing it to protect their power couple storyline. Fans ran wild with these crumbs, convinced that when the courtroom doors finally opened, the entire cast would be dragged in, forced to testify about what they had seen and signed. For the first time, it felt like the reunion stage wasn't the real finale. The courthouse was. And then, rattled by mounting pressure, Kirk made a desperate move. He posted another cryptic Instagram story, himself flipping through a thick binder of contracts with the caption, "They signed it all away." Willingly. Within minutes, the post vanished, deleted before most fans even saw it. But the blogs had screenshots, and that was enough. The implication was obvious. He was preparing to argue that Rasheeda hadn't been manipulated at all, but that she knowingly signed away her rights. It was the classic Frost spin. Turn betrayal into ambiguity. Blur the line between coercion and consent. But instead of intimidating the public, it backfired. The internet erupted with rage. Comments flooded his page, calling him a coward, a con man, a husband who weaponized paperwork against the woman who built him up. What he thought was a display of power only exposed his fear, making him look like a man drowning in his own lies. Behind the scenes, Rasheeda's lawyers pounced on his mistake. Court documents were allegedly updated, with attorneys demanding full access to every contract he had ever hinted at online. If the flash drive existed, the court wanted it. If the safe was real, they demanded the key. Suddenly, the very weapon Kirk thought he controlled was slipping through his fingers, pulled inch by inch into the grip of the law. For the public watching, it was electrifying. The same man who once smirked his way through cheating scandals was now being forced to surrender. His secrets, not on TV, but in legal filings that could strip him of his empire. The children became another heart-wrenching layer. Fans debated whether those contracts threatened their inheritance, whether years of their mother's grind had been stolen from their future. Sympathy for Rasheeda deepened, with thousands praising her for fighting not just for herself, but for her kids. What once felt like a marital mess now felt generational, a wound that could scar their legacy. And yet through it all, Rasheeda held her composure. She never shouted, never cursed, never broke online. Her silence wasn't fear. It was strategy. Fans described her as moving like a queen in chess, patient, precise, waiting for the moment she could finally say checkmate. Then came the leak that shook the internet to its core. A gossip blogger posted what appeared to be an official, notarized document showing Frost Enterprises listed as the majority shareholder of Prest. Unlike past blurry screenshots, this one looked terrifyingly real, dated, signed, and stamped. TikTok detectives tore it apart line by line. Twitter Spaces stayed, lived for hours, arguing whether Rasheeda had been duped or complicit. Instagram comments exploded with heartbreak, anger, and support all at once. To many, it was the ultimate betrayal. The boutique she had built her name on might not even legally be hers. But instead of breaking, Rasheeda played her card with surgical precision. She posted a single picture standing tall inside her store with the caption, "Built by me, always mine." The post turned into a rallying cry, amassing thousands of comments and shares. For her supporters, it wasn't just defiance, it was a promise. Paper couldn't erase her grind, and no contract could silence her will to fight. Bye. The time hearings loomed. Atlanta buzzed like a city on the brink of history. Reporters camped outside Fulton County's courthouse. Bloggers hired legal analysts. Fans organized watch parties online, treating the saga like the Super Bowl of reality TV. For Rasheeda, this wasn't about gossip anymore. It was about liberation, proving she wasn't a puppet of paperwork, but the true architect of her empire. For Kirk, it was about survival, clinging to the narrative that he had always been the mastermind. And for the world watching, it was about truth. The files, once just a whisper, were about to be dragged into the light. And when they were, The story of Rasheeda and Kirk Frost would never be the same again. The day the court finally opened its doors, Atlanta felt like it had stopped breathing. Reporters packed the steps of Fulton County, cameras flashing like lightning, while bloggers streamed live from their phones, narrating every shadow that moved near the courthouse. The Frost saga had left the realm of entertainment long ago. This was now a legal battle with the weight of history pressing down on it. Fans gathered outside holding handmade signs, some chanting in support of Rasheeda, others taunting Kirk with jeers and slogans that mocked his silence. Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. Every sound echoed against marble walls, every shuffle of paper carried the weight of years of whispers, and every glance exchanged between husband and wife felt like another strike in a war that had been simmering for decades. Rasheeda walked in first, her head high, flanked not by castmates or friends, but by lawyers in sharp suits who looked like soldiers at her side. She wore a deep crimson dress that seemed chosen with purpose, a color of both power and warning. Her expression betrayed nothing. No fear, no anger, only quiet defiance. Behind her, Kirk Frost appeared, clutching a black leather briefcase that everyone watching swore contained the infamous flash drive. His face was unreadable, his smirk gone, his usual bravado reduced to a tight jaw and tired eyes. The couple who once branded themselves as a team now looked like sworn enemies, and the entire city leaned in to witness who would strike first. The filings laid out in front of the judge painted a chilling story. According to the allegations, Kirk had positioned himself as the majority owner of Frost Bistro, Pressed Boutique, and even the rights to Rasheeda's music catalog. Legal documents listed Frost Enterprises as the controlling entity, while her role appeared minimized to consultant or performer. For fans who had followed her journey from mixtapes to businesswoman, it was like watching the foundation of her legacy being ripped out from under her feet. The courtroom fell into tense silence as one by one, copies of contracts were read aloud. Each page felt like a knife twist, revealing how carefully the empire had been built to favor Kirk while still projecting the illusion of partnership. But this was not the same Rasheeda who once swallowed betrayal quietly for the sake of appearances. Her lawyers fired back, piece by piece, accusing Kirk of fraud, manipulation, and exploiting the trust of his wife to secure financial control. Witnesses were called. Former employees, business partners, even accountants who testified about strange signatures and missing filings. The flash drive, once whispered about like an urban legend, was demanded in discovery, and whispers spread through the courthouse that its contents were damning. If produced, it could reveal not just the contracts tied to their businesses, but personal correspondence that exposed years of control and coercion. The very weapon Kirk had clutched so tightly was now being pried from his hands under the weight of the law. Outside, the internet erupted in real time. Clips from the hearing spread instantly, every quote dissected, every screenshot turned into a meme. Fans called Rasheeda a queen reclaiming her throne, while critics painted Kirk as a man undone by his own arrogance. Hashtags like Tatra Checkmate and Sock Files Don't Lie trended worldwide. Podcasts streamed outside the courthouse as if covering a championship fight, their hosts declaring that reality TV had finally collided with reality itself. The anticipation reached a fever pitch, with the world waiting for the verdict that would decide not just the fate of their marriage, but the ownership of everything they had built. Inside, the pressure cracked Kirk's composure. When pressed about his Instagram posts, his binder of contracts, and the safe allegedly housing the flash drive, his answers faltered. What once came off as confidence now sounded like excuses. His silence on social media had been framed as strategy, but in court, silence turned into cornering. Each time his lawyers objected, each time the judge overruled, his grip on control loosened. For once, the man who had turned paperwork into a weapon looked powerless in front of the very system he thought he had mastered. Every minute that passed seemed to shift the balance further toward Rasheeda, who remained poised, calm, and deliberate, never breaking her stare. When the session adjourned, the city roared as if a verdict had already been delivered. Bloggers screamed into their phones, fans outside chanted her name, and inside the courthouse, whispers swirled that the judge was leaning heavily toward exposing every last file. For Rasheeda, it wasn't just about winning ownership, it was about reclaiming her story. She had been painted as complicit, mocked as a figurehead, humiliated as an employee in her own empire. But now, standing firm while legal receipts were dragged into daylight, she embodied resilience and strategy in its purest form. Every step she took out of that courtroom was filmed, and every frame told the same story. This was no longer a woman surviving betrayal. This was a woman preparing to walk away with her name intact and her power restored. And as the crowd screamed outside, one truth became undeniable. The Frost saga had never really been about love versus betrayal, loyalty versus infidelity, or even business versus family. It had always been about ownership, about who truly held the keys when the lights went off and the cameras stopped rolling. And now, with the world watching, those keys were slipping out of Kirk's hands. The files he once held as leverage had become the chains around his neck, and the queen he once underestimated was finally making her move. Whether the final verdict came tomorrow or months later, the outcome no longer felt in doubt. The empire was shifting, and for the first time in years, it was shifting back toward the woman who had built it from the ground up.